other sort of greetings. Shalom, konnichiwa, etc. Welcome to the Watchdog. I'm your host, C.Jay Cox. This is continuously becoming a worse and worse time to be alive for those who love liberty. Still not as bad as it could be, most definitely, especially in this country. But there is some problems in the world, and we're going to be talking about a lot of those problems today because these problems are escalating very quickly. You can see one of these problems on the screen right now, I'm sure. But before that, I just want to make some announcements. Namely, I corrected the misspelling on the Watchdog logo. Yeah, so I don't know. That's just something that was interesting to me and me alone. Probably nobody else, but yeah. So that's cool. And also, basically, that's everything. Actually, there's supposed to be significantly more, but unfortunately, I'm horrible at planning things. So hopefully next week there will be significantly more to be announcing before these. Anyways, let's get right into the news. Tommy Robinson has been sentenced to 9 months in prison. Just to be perfectly clear about this situation, I think that this is a travesty, but I am entirely unsurprised. In my opinion, the line, as far as the United Kingdom is concerned, you know, the line for them jumping into tyranny was a very long time ago. A very long time ago. I think, you know, when you're at the level of banning guns and getting licenses for bleach and television, you're talking about banning knives or potentially banning cars, covering up massive rape gangs, you know what I mean? And then, you know, don't even get me started on the outright murder, because that's what it was, of Charlie Gard and Alfie Evans. You know, their disrespect of the Brexit vote, and etc. So, you know, this wasn't something that wasn't surprising at all. I've even lost a lot of hope for Britain, in the sense that a lot of the people who I thought were going to try and help Britain fight its way back to at least some level of decency, some level of pride in its nation and in its culture and in its history and things like that, namely Nigel Farage, turned out to not be what I thought they were, which is fine. These things happen amongst politicians. But, you know, he turned out to be somebody who is not interested in fighting for free speech when it came to defending people like Mark Meechan, Carl Benjamin, or Sargon of Akkad and Count Dankula, as they are also known. He went back on a lot of the things he had said himself that Gerard Batten was now parroting. And I don't say parroting to say that Batten wasn't his own person, but just to kind of illustrate the hypocrisy of Nigel Farage, right? When he was saying things like he's obsessed with Islam, right? When it's, you know, Nigel Farage was a very, very stringent critic of Islam early on, or when he would say things like he's getting associated with, you know, figures who are far right, when he had people who were associated with actual legitimate fascist groups working with him. As far as actual politics, he's farther to the right, Farage is, than either Meechan or Benjamin. And of course, Yiannopoulos and Paul Joseph Watson have also been members of the UKIP party as well. I feel like there was another one that I'm missing. I cannot remember at the moment, but I do feel like there was. Anyways, and, you know, with Farage's betrayal, of course, came the complete destruction, basically, of UKIP. Batten is now no longer the leader there. So, all that to say, none of this is surprising. I've lost hope for Britain for a very long time. So, seeing Tommy Robinson now being convicted of journalism, as his shirt says, which we'll get into what the crime actually is as far as the legal system in Britain is concerned. But in reality, it is being convicted for journalism. But the fact that that happened, entirely unsurprising to me. This is just the level we're at in Britain, or, you know, the People's Republic of Britain stand, as you might want to call it. But anyways, down there in lowercase Britain, Tommy Robinson sentenced to 9 months in prison. This is from Breitbart News. And the person writing this article is Jack Montgomery. This was on the 11th of July. Tommy Robinson has been resentenced to 9 months in prison following his reconviction for contempt of court. Robinson had instructed his lawyer, quote, to read out a series of past contempt of court findings against newspapers, which, in summary, had not led to jail terms for editors or reporters accused of disrupting trials, end quote. According to BBC reporter Dominic Cassiani, I believe is how you pronounce that, but to no avail. With judges imposing a custodial term only 1 month shorter than his previous sentence, declaring that, quote, the main purpose of the penalty is punishment and deterrence. Which I believe is exactly true. And the basic fact of the matter is when Tommy Robinson says he's being prosecuted because of who he is rather than what he does, that is correct. We're going to get more into that in a minute. This is from Dominic Cassiani's Twitter. He says that his client finds himself in a worse position, including the prospect of a longer sentence that amounts to double jeopardy for having appealed his original jailing for contempt last year, which is exactly true, but of course they don't have laws against double jeopardy in Great Britain. Further, he argues the court must take into account the actual harm caused to the trial of the sex screaming gang by Tommy Robinson, SYL's Facebook video. Quote, there is no suggestion that the criminal defendants did not have a fair trial, notwithstanding the events outside, which is completely correct. By the time he was recording, first off, everything that he said was already made public, and second off, the ruling had actually already been made in the court case. But anyways, Robinson was initially arrested, tried, and imprisoned within a matter of hours after live streaming accused grooming gang members, later convicted. I guess they weren't convicted quite yet. Well, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I've heard specifically from the Rebel.media that they were convicted. So I guess I would have to check up on that. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. Anyways, they were later convicted, of course. So we'll just go ahead and say the jury is out as far as whether they were convicted by the time it was recorded. Not that it matters. We'll move on. Whose case was subject to reporting restrictions, but freed by... Let me restart that. Robinson was initially arrested, tried, and imprisoned within a matter of hours after live streaming accused grooming gang members, later convicted, whose case was subject to reporting restrictions, but freed by appellate judges, who ruled his initial hearing had been rushed and unfair. Attorney General Jeffrey Cox was given leave to relegate the case, however, which he chose to do, resulting in Robinson's being reconvicted despite his defense team's argument that his behavior was not materially different to the behavior we see outside courts day in and day out, I'm pretty sure is what it's trying to say, but it just kind of ends the quote at day. Anyways, from mainstream media reporters. This is exactly accurate. We're going to get a lot into what my personal opinions are on this, but I do just want to finish the article because I want to get to all of the articles. I very rarely actually get to all the articles because I always rant about my own personal opinions. But anyways, the sentencing comes days after Mr. Robinson's appeal to U.S. Appealed to U.S. President Donald Trump to grant him political asylum, which Trump unfortunately did not do. The activist has said his sentence following his previous overturned conviction saw him, quote, imprisoned for over 2.5 months in solitary confinement, held against my categorization, moved to the highest Muslim population Category C prison, subjugated to mental torture and constant threats and abuse, and had all of my rights removed in the interest of prison safety, end quote. And he believes his treatment by the courts and the state more generally is political persecution. This is 100% correct. Here we see Dellingpole from Breitbart saying the Tommy Robinson verdict is a travesty of justice. That is entirely correct. The 9 months comprises. The 9 months comprises 6 months for Robinson's actions outside Leeds Crown Court and the activation of a separate 3-month suspended sentence for similar actions at Canterbury Crown Court. Time served will be discounted, however, meaning Robinson could be eligible for automatic release on license after roughly 2 months. So, a lot of things to talk about in regards to this abomination here. First things first, this is most definitely political persecution. If you don't think this is political persecution, I very, very strongly question your definition of political persecution. What Tommy Robinson did, and you can go find the videos for yourself, they are online, They are on numerous different news outlets. They may or may not still be on YouTube, on Tommy Robinson's channel. I'm not 100% sure because, unfortunately, the overlords at YouTube like to take down people's content that they disagree with politically, even though they say that that's not what they're up to. That is entirely the case, right? That is exactly what they're up to. What Tommy Robinson did is ask how the Muslim rapists, in this particular case, alleged rapists, or I'm not, like I said, I'm not entirely sure if they were convicted yet, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just say alleged, okay? These alleged rapists, he was asking them how they felt about the verdict, and he was reporting outside of the court on the crime that these people were being tried for. Now, people have said that there was the reporting restriction on this particular case. I think that it's ridiculous that there are reporting restrictions in the first place, but my understanding is that this particular reporting restriction had actually been lifted at the time that Tommy Robinson was recording, and in fact, on Tommy Robinson's recording, you can see, like I said, it's right there for all to see. You can go look it up right now if you'd like to. You can see him asking the police at the courts if he can record in the spot where he eventually records, and then the police later on arrest him. Okay, so the fact of the matter is what he was doing was not actually violating this reporting restriction. But even besides that, let me just be perfectly frank that if you agree that any reporting restriction at any point in time for any reason at all is justified, then you quite frankly do not believe in freedom of the press as the founders intended it by the First Amendment of the Constitution. It is complete and total freedom of the press. Okay, they have the freedom in that particular regard to report on literally anything that they want to. Okay, they obviously have to be held to some sort of a standard in the sense of that they can't lie, right? That's libel or slander, depending on whether or not it's written or spoken. You know, they have industry standards for like journalistic ethics and things like that, even though that's not necessarily a legal thing, at least not all of them, right? But the fact of the matter is they are free. They're free to report on whatever they want. They can go. I can go right now, even though I'm just a citizen, right? It's still technically citizens reporting. I can go right now and be outside any court in the entire country and report on the case, the situation in that court. Especially considering the fact that all this would be public information too. And it was public information in Tommy Robinson's case as well. But that's what they arrested him for. They had him imprisoned and convicted of this crime within hours, by the way, which is, I know the Constitution says you have the right to a speedy trial, but it doesn't mean so speedy that you don't actually have a case to mount, a chance to mount a defense or post any bail or have a trial by jury or anything like that. By the way, both convictions, no trial by jury. So that's another example of this being a travesty of justice, right? So it's double jeopardy. It's imprisoning somebody for journalism, for just being outside of a court and reporting and asking somebody how they feel about their verdict, right? It's putting somebody in prison too fast before they actually have the capability to mount a defense, and then the second time, just putting them in prison in general. I mean, that's cruel and unusual punishment. The first time is also cruel and unusual punishment because they end up basically malnourishing him in the case of sunlight and food and things like that, having, as he put it, a can of tuna and a piece of fruit a day, being locked in solitary confinement all day. And for those of you who think that that's not accurate, the man was deathly skinny, at least looking deathly skinny comparatively to how big he usually is when he came out, incredibly pale, all this other kind of stuff. So I certainly believe it, and I've seen the things that they've been doing so far. And by the way, why was he in a prison where violent criminals are held in the first place if his only crime is contempt of court? Specifically, a prison that is 80% Muslim in their population, which happens to be the people who he is going out against, is people who are not only Muslim, but specifically the Muslims who are committing crimes, specifically these violent crimes that are associated with grooming gangs, right? Don't tell me that's not deliberate. That's definitely deliberate. The British government is definitely trying to, if not have Tommy Robinson killed, then, roughed up and taught a lesson. Certainly. That is the case. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is the case. And I'm very disappointed, actually, in a lot of the people who are against Tommy in this particular case. First off, I was disappointed to see that the president did not grant Tommy asylum in this country. In fact, to the best of my knowledge, he didn't even address it. Neither did Trump Jr., neither did Ivanka, neither did Mike Pence. Even some of the people in the Senate who I thought might address it, like Rand Paul or Ted Cruz, didn't. So that was unfortunate. But, like I said with Nigel Farage thinks that this is a completely legitimate conviction and that there's nothing wrong with it. Well, I mean, I guess that's where me in support of this man would have to separate. And I know I'm not a British person, but let me say, if you are a British person and you watch this, how could you support a man like that? How could you possibly support somebody who is saying that, yeah, I have no problem prosecuting people for journalism, prosecuting them with double jeopardy, prosecuting them without allowing them to mount a defense, saying that they, what would we say, admitted to being guilty, even though they were never even told whether or not they were guilty or innocent. They had no opportunity to offer a plea, trial without jury, all that kind of stuff. If you can support that, then there's really no reason at all for anybody to support you in anything, right? There's a lot of things where you kind of, as Dr. Kent Hovind, who's a creation scientist, says, you can kind of chew the meat and spit out the bones, right? There's a lot of situations like that. This is not one of them, right? And I know everybody's saying he's Mr. Brexit, so he's going to help lead the Brexit. Yeah, he does that at the cost of actual freedom, because he betrayed all of his old views, like trying to get rid of their ridiculous universal health care, quote unquote, or trying to maybe relax the laws on guns and trying to do something about immigration in the country. Of course, the whole EU, skepticism, Euroscepticism movement is basically his baby. Well, he betrayed all that. He's not down with that anymore. He's whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is, what happened to Tommy Robinson is a travesty of justice. And I'm not 100% sure that... I know he's convinced that he is going to die in prison. I am not so convinced that he is going to die in prison for a few reasons. Number one, I don't know if the British government at this particular point, considering how high profile this case has been, could actually afford for Tommy Robinson to die in prison. I have a feeling it would cause literal riots, to be honest with you. I also happen to think that Tommy Robinson's time is just not over. To call it religious superstition if you happen to not be a religious person, but I just personally think that there are things that Tommy Robinson still needs to achieve. I think that he has a role, divinely placed in that role, as every person who has a role on this planet is. It's not like he's a prophet or anything like that. That's not what I mean. But everything is, in my opinion, orchestrated by, divine power, which is, of course, God. I'm a Christian. And on top of that, too, there is the possibility, like he was saying here, or like they were saying here on this article, Mr. Montgomery, he can get out in 2 months. That is potentially possible. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. But it is potentially possible. Significantly less likely that he dies if he's in there 2 months than 9 months, right? And, of course, we don't actually know if he's going to be going to one of those ridiculously high security prisons with violent gangs in them that happen to have a ridiculously high Muslim population, which is definitely not a conspiracy if you're certainly not news or constantly broadcasting something that I cannot say on this program because I don't want to, and etc. Moving on, because on top of that, there's another British figure we want to talk about. This feller, Paul Joseph Watson. Facebook put a fatwa on me, he says. I'm not even joking, he says. Is he telling the truth? Well, let's figure out.
Facebook's a private company. It can do what it likes. Really? Can it issue fatwas against people? Because that's just what happened. I'm not even joking. Facebook literally posted an update to its community standards policy saying it's acceptable to incite violence against me. Yes, really. So as you know, when Facebook banned me back in May, they designated me a dangerous individual. So dangerous. And then yesterday, Facebook posted this. Do not post threats that could lead to death and other forms of high severity violence of any targets where threat is defined as any of the following. Statements of intent to commit high severity violence or calls for high severity violence. Unless the target is an organisation or individual covered in the Dangerous Individuals and Organisations policy.
Yeah. So, I think it is accurate. Not technically a fatwa because they're not Islamic, but the same general idea, right? Facebook has definitely said they're totally down. Okay, that vile scum, Mark Zuckerberg, and all of his little cronies have said they are totally down with the advocation of, not only advocation of violence, but the actually illegal threat of imminent violence, right? When we talk about what is the limit of free speech, it is very, very, very far out there, right? So, for example, you can say, I think such and such a person should be assassinated, but you can't say, hey, you should go out and assassinate such and such a person, right? You can advocate for war against the country, but you can't advocate, and you can advocate for violence in the sense of that you're saying that it would be a good idea. For example, when people say that they want people to be milkshaked, right? That is definitely covered under your First Amendment right. When people like the witches in Congress right now, AOC and Rashida Tlaib and etc., refuse to condemn Antifa violence, that's completely covered by the First Amendment. What is not covered by the First Amendment is threats that could lead to death. That is what is known as a threat of imminent violence, something that is that could cause people to take direct action, calling for direct action yourself, right? And that is not covered by the First Amendment. But Facebook is saying it's totally covered by our community standards policy so long as it's somebody we don't like. That is what you're seeing right now. Threats that could lead to death and other forms of high-severity violence of any targets where threat is defined as any of the following: statement of intent to commit high-severity violence, statement of intent to commit high-severity violence, or calls for high-severity violence, right? What was the criteria for not being covered by the First Amendment? Imminent violence and direct action. Well, you see both, right? And these are not allowed, according to Facebook, unless the target is an organization or individual covered in the Dangerous Individuals and Organizations policy, or is described as having carried out violent crimes or sexual offenses, wherein criminal predator status has been established by media reports, market knowledge of this news event. So, that covers people like Tommy Robinson who are being tried for political crimes, being tried for who they are rather than the crimes that they have committed. And why do I say that, by the way? Because something we forgot to point out there is that people were actually doing what Tommy Robinson did while Tommy Robinson was going to court to go to jail for what Tommy Robinson did, namely asking people outside and reporting outside of a court case. But whatever. Anyways, so Tommy Robinson is probably on the dangerous persons list anyways, but let's just assume he wasn't. The fact that he is being tried with criminal or predator status, if he is tried with criminal status, I think, yeah, in order to be prison, it has to be a criminal charge, right? So that gives you the ability to advocate violence against him on their platform. Perfectly fine, right? For those of you who think O.J. Simpson was innocent, guess what? Now you can advocate violence against O.J. Simpson before the case is even over. Described as carried out violent crimes or sexual offenses wherein criminal predator status has been established by media reports, market knowledge of news events, not by legal case proceedings. So, by the way, that also means that you can advocate violence against the Duke lacrosse team before they were found innocent of the false crime, because according to media reports and market knowledge of the news event, they would be described as having carried out violent crimes or sexual offenses. On top of that, people who are on the Dangerous Individuals and Organizations policy. This is Facebook's actual policy change. This is real. Right now, in 2019, Facebook is saying completely cool to advocate direct and immediate violence to threaten the lives of people who we disagree with politically or who the media has described as criminals. And if that does not terrify you, please get the hell out of my country, because I don't want you here. By the way, in case anybody wants to turn that into something that it's not, I don't care what color you are. If you don't agree with freedom, There was a multinational country, just like our multi-ethnic country, just like ours, right up north on the border, that'll tyrannize you all the live long day. Please go there. I'm sick and tired of you guys. This is Facebook's actual policy. You're seeing it right here for yourself. When he says Facebook put a fatwa on me, that is not bull at all. By the way, keep in mind, think of how many people this now affects. I mean, especially he's going after the dangerous individuals and organizations one, and that's important, of course, because a lot of media figures are being listed like that. But criminal or predator status being established by media reports, that is easily the most dangerous aspect of all of this, because that means it's okay to threaten Brett Kavanaugh, right? That means because it's media reports. Notice it says nothing about the courts. It says nothing about whether or not you were actually tried for your crime, whether or not you were found guilty of your crime. It says if that status has been established by media reports or market knowledge of news events. So that's Brett Kavanaugh, that's O.J. Simpson, that's Michael Jackson, that's the lacrosse kids, that's Mattress Girl's, victim, because he is the victim in that case, let's be perfectly frank, right? That's Donald Trump, actually, in a lot of ways, because if you recall, Donald Trump was accused of a lot of crimes that he did not, at least to the best of our knowledge, has not committed. Maybe. We'll get into some of that in a little bit, actually, because jury's out on that, and I'm actually going to... We'll get there. And like I said, we'll get there. But you see my point, right? He hasn't been tried and convicted for anything. Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton haven't been tried and convicted for anything. By the way, this actually does mean that you could advocate for violence against Hillary Clinton, too, because she has been given criminal or predator status by media reports and media knowledge in the past. I don't think you could anymore, because it's not that time in history anymore, but that would classify, right? I mean, this is a ridiculously dangerous policy here, is my point. And Facebook is not even trying to hide the fact that they are down, 100% down, with an authoritarian crackdown on conservatives, on Christians, on independents, and centrists, and left-wing people who are not completely out of their mind, right? They're down to crack down on you. They're down to advocate active violence against you. They're down to let terrorist organizations dox you and go after you and go after your family. They're down. They're completely cool with it. 100% on board. Let's go ahead and watch some more.
Policy. That's me. So in other words, Facebook just informed its 2 billion users that it's acceptable to post statements of intent of high severity violence against me. This is literally illegal in the United Kingdom under the 1988 Malicious Communications Act, which states any person who sends to another person a letter, electronic communication, or article of any description which conveys a threat is guilty of an offense. Facebook's a private company.
It's also illegal in the United States. It's 1969. I think it's Fernfield versus Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. It's the last major ruling on free speech, which says that calls for imminent and direct violence is where the line is drawn. But advocating for general violence, like, for example, recruiting or saying we should revolt against the government or recruiting for militia or something like that, those would not be against the First Amendment, right? Those would still be covered by the First Amendment.
It can do what it likes. Can it flagrantly break UK law? Can it openly incite violence against people? The largest social media company in the world with over 2 billion users says it's fine to incite violence against me despite this being totally illegal. The same company that lectures us all the time.
By the way, that's not just Paul Joseph Watson too, right? Of course, Paul Joseph Watson is focusing on Paul Joseph Watson because Paul Joseph Watson is, in fact, Paul Joseph Watson. But this is also Alex Jones. This is also Gavin McInnes. This is also Laura Loomer. This is also Lawrence Southern. This is also Stefan Molyneux, right? This will very soon be Joe Rogan and Ben Shapiro. Let's be perfectly frank. We know where this is going. This is probably going to include Ted Cruz soon. It's probably going to include Ron Paul soon. This may even include people like Dave Rubin soon. And Brett Weinstein soon. I mean, there's an entire college of morons who already thinks Brett Weinstein is a racist. even though he's literally a far lefty, hippie, progressive commie. I'm not even being disrespectful. That's just legitimately the facts, right? Doesn't matter. Perfectly cool to incite violence against them, thus saith the Facebook. Bunch of scumbags.
About the need to stop hate is directly encouraging hate. This is like some futuristic sci-fi dystopia where the artificial intelligence takes over and starts marking people for elimination. Imagine a drone army of Mark Zuckerberg clones stomping on a human face forever. That's our collective future.
And I was human. I am human, still.
They're painting a target on my back. I've already received dozens of death threats on Facebook over the years. Here, 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 and here. The world's 8th biggest corporation has literally sanctioned death threats against me for words I say on the internet. Where does it go? Where can it possibly go from here? And what could I possibly be saying that represents such a threat to them? Seriously, Facebook's a private company. It can solicit death threats against whoever it wants. Let me be crystal clear. Facebook is literally telling its 2 billion users they can break the law and incite violence against anyone Facebook doesn't like. Facebook is so power mad and out of control, it thinks it's above the law. Let that sink in. Facebook is evil. They spy on you. They sell your data. Facebook is a cult. They demand uniformity of opinion and punish anyone who strays outside their ghetto of acceptable opinion. 38% of Brits have stopped using Facebook in the past year alone, and so should you. Delete your Facebook account right now. And I'm not going to reveal my hand, but this is Lawsuit City. And if you want to help me with that, the Subscribe Star link is in the description. Oh, and that social media summit that begins at the White House today may be the largest social media corporation on the planet issuing de facto fatwas against people for having the wrong political opinions should be part of the conversation. Just saying.
And we definitely should be finding new platforms too. Let me say that, unfortunately, at this point, it is difficult, and I'm not going to say we have to completely leave Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, because I think we should actually use them to gain our own base until they eventually force us off, whilst also using that base to establish new platforms, right? Basically kind of feeding off them, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm not entirely shy about that. Don't know why we should be. This is basically war. If you want to get technical, it's just business war. It's a different kind of war. War without bloodshed, just a war with lots of money shed, really, right? Well, at least without bloodshed so far. I don't know if Facebook wants to actively endorse violence against people it dislikes, so maybe Facebook would like it to get bloody. I'm not entirely sure. Real quick, just want to let Paul Joseph Watson.
It's absolutely crucial for you to help me fight the war on free speech by supporting me via Subscribe Star, link in description. And also signing up for my free newsletter at summit.news/newsletter.
All right. Just so you guys know, because that's cool stuff. Definitely stuff fighting for liberty that you should know about. There are a lot of problems in the world right now, and Facebook is one of the biggest. Facebook is an evil organization, just like Google is, just like Amazon is. These are despicable corporations. And by the way, let me just take this moment to say you need to get on Gab. Okay, Gab so far has said they're going to remain committed to your free speech. They've got around, I think, 20 or 25,000 people on it. That's nothing compared to the 500 million of Twitter, which is the kind of social media platform it's in the vein of. Leave Twitter or stay. I guess it doesn't matter. I'm still on Twitter, so I guess I can't be a hypocrite here. If you're going to use Twitter to siphon, like I said, the same thing I was just saying, like use it to siphon views and stuff like that. But get on Gab as well. What's it going to harm you? All you're going to do is further propagate companies who are fighting for your freedom. So do it. Get on Gab. By the way, not sponsored. Wish I was. Be a lot wealthier. However, get on Gab. Do it. It's totally dope. Once you get on there, you can follow me at a Gab that I will give you later on, actually, at the end of the show, because I'm not going to go ahead and endorse myself in the middle. But you can do it, right? You can follow other people too, like David Wood and Alex Jones, right? And eventually you'll be able to follow CNN and all that crap too, because I know this is a really shocking and completely baffling concept, but the tyrannical always eat themselves alive. And they will eventually censor the left as well. They've already censored members of the left who have decided that they're not down with censoring members of the right or Christian groups. For example, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Joe Rogan, and etc. So, yeah, garbage. News is garbage. Here are the extremist groups going to the White House social media summit. Now, I point this out simply to point out why you cannot trust Media Matters. This company, this ridiculously, bafflingly, absurdly deceitful news organization, if it's going to be called such a thing, right, has so many factual errors and slanderous, choices of words and things like that in this. It's completely ridiculous. So, look at this. I'm not going to read this entire article. I just want to point out how garbage this is, okay? Multiple right-wing figures have been invited to the summit. Individuals and organizations that have said they were invited to the summit or have been confirmed to attend. Individual conservative radio host Bill Mitchell, a right-wing meme maker known as Carpe Donkum, Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, right-wing propaganda YouTube. That's completely ridiculous. Right-wing propaganda YouTube channel Prager University. It's not a propaganda YouTube channel, Media Matters. It is a channel that happens to be conservative, which is called a think tank. Therefore, you would call it a conservative think tank. But because you're so high and mighty with your head up your own rectum, right, with my views are definitely the correct views, and your views are evil Nazi views, you racist scum, misogynist, blah, 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 blah. The meme monster and Brian Reagan's jokes, right? Because you're that guy, you have to just throw the propaganda word, the right-wing word, right? And don't get me wrong, yeah, are they right-wing? Yeah, but I know what you're trying to say. You're trying to say far-right terrorist associated with the KKK. It's ridiculous. Pro-Trump cartoonist Ben Garrison, whose invitation has since been rescinded. Human Events publisher Will Chamberlain. Media Research founder Brent Bozell. Conservative think tank The Heritage Foundation. Students for Trump co-founder Ryan Fourier. Right-wing personality Ali Akbar, also known as Ali Alexander. Discredited, okay, and then it puts citizen journalists in quotations. James O'Keefe. Completely ridiculous. First off, discredited, that's just false. I mean, definitely not any more discredited than Jim Acosta or Chris Cuomo, or Carlos Maza, right? Is that how you say his last name? The Vox idiot, right? Definitely not any more discredited than them. Senator Marsha, right-wing commentator Tim Pool. Okay, an outright lie. False. Not correct. Tim Pool, ladies and gentlemen, is a freaking communist. He's an anarcho-socialist, is his actual political opinions. He's an intersectionalist. He is as lefty as the lefties come. And I'm not saying this as a diss on Tim Pool. I actually like Tim Pool because he is a fighter for free speech and things like that. But Tim Pool is as Marxist as a person could possibly get. He is as intersectionalist as a person could possibly get. He is as globalist as a person could possibly get. As anti-borders as a person could possibly get. As, hey, let's all go smoke some weed, man, and hang out at the beach, as a person could possibly get. To call this man right-wing commentator, is either horribly dishonest, so dishonest, in fact, that this is just something that should not be allowed to be printed. And what I mean by that is that the people who are working up at Media Matters, who are editing this, should not allow their writers to publish something that is so ridiculously false, right? Or it's dishonest. By the way, it's the second one. Spoiler alert. Anyways, we're going to see that a little bit further in the article. Plant USA Chief Creative Director Benny Johnson. Far-right blog, The Gateway Pundit, founder Jim Holt. Fringe social media platform, Minds.com. Fringe social media platform. See, that's another thing, too. Minds.com has stricter rules about hate speech and things like that than any of the other social media platforms currently. Any of them. Including Facebook, including Pinterest, including Tumblr, right? Any of them. That's a fact. I advise you to look at David Wood's video on that matter. So once again, outright falsehood. Discredited journalist James O'Keefe, outright falsehood. Right-wing commentator Tim Pool, outright falsehood. Fringe conservative, or not fringe conservative, but fringe social media blog, right? Minds.com. False. Outright false. Lies. Moving on. Conservative singer Joy Villa, anti-abortion activist Lily Rose, YouTube conspiracy theorist Mark Dice. And it goes through with some of these other things that are just completely ridiculous. I'm only going to get to a few of them. So it says about Carpe Donkum, repeated guests on the conspiracy theory outlet, trying to associate him with InfoWars, which, to be fair, he's a little bit associated with InfoWars. That he did is technically how he got popular, at least recently. Donkum is a meme creator whose video lauding Trump and targeting his perceived enemies has been tweeted by the president's Twitter accounts. He also won a 2018 meme contest held by conspiracy theorist outlet InfoWars, where he's been a regular guest, including an appearance only days before the summit. Runs a media outlet with far-right figures. He's assisted with the creation of the site Culture, which is reportedly helmed by multiple far-right figures, including fellow summit guest Ali Akbar. Regularly posts on the subreddit The Donald, which has been quarantined for calls to violence. Notice they're not finding any of his own personal calls to violence, but this area where he's been before has been quarantined for calls to violence. Not the same thing, is it? Of course not. Just because you happen to be on Facebook while people on Facebook are calling for violence, does that mean you were calling for violence? What if you're on a Facebook debate group where people in the debate group were calling for violence? Does that mean that you were calling for violence? Etc. Maybe the group itself should be shut down according to your terms of service. That's obviously your prerogative. But that doesn't mean the individuals in the group were all calling for violence. Donkum has ties to white nationalist Stephen Molyneux. Another outright falsehood. Stephen Molyneux is not a white nationalist. Stephen Molyneux is an anarcho-capitalist. Well, he at least was. I think he's gotten a little bit more towards the minarchist position. But this person is definitely not a white nationalist. He has no belief in race superiority or anything like that. That's just an outright liberal lie. Okay, continuing on. And by the way, what would it matter if he had an association with Stephen Molyneux? How many different people have had associations with Louis Farrakhan or Malcolm X or other people who called for violence? Charlie Kirk leads Turning Point USA, an organization with a history of racist incidents. Yes, Turning Point USA, Candace Owens' platform, not that she founded it, but the platform that has, thrown her into the spotlight. That is a racist organization, most certainly. Definitely. Focuses on increasing right-wing political influence on college campuses. There's a long history of involvement in racist incidents. For example, its members have used social media to praise white supremacy and shared racist memes and rape jokes in chat messages. Notice it doesn't show any examples, because you can't find any examples. Kirk has used social media to push lies and racist, anti-immigrant, and anti-Muslim messages. On his Twitter feed, Kirk has posted a number of tweets that malign immigrants and Muslims. He has also once tweeted a flawed statistic that minimized police brutality against black people, claiming that a police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be killed by a police officer. Did anything in there sound racist to you? If you're anti-immigrant, which by the way actually means anti-illegal immigrant, if you say that you're 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a police officer, or as a police officer, than you are to be killed as a black male by a police officer, is that racist? Are any of those two things racist? Do they imply that you believe in the racial superiority of your race or the deficiency of another? No, they do not. This is false. This is lies. It is slanderous. And this is why you should not be trusting people like this. Anti-LGBTQ figure Dennis Prager, which is nonsense, believing in traditional marriage and saying that you shouldn't allow transgenders to use the, quote, bathroom of their choice or the wrestling match of their choice or things like that, right? The wrestling league of their choice, things like that. That is not being against homosexuals or transgenders for that matter. They have this whole thing about Ben Garrison. They call this cartoon, this is anti-Semitic because it has George Soros, who happens to be a Jew. What's not anti-Semitic is, of course, the New York Times. And by the way, this is actually a little bit anti-Semitic because it does see in the background the whole Rothschilds thing, right? And it's by somebody who has been known to be associated with these groups. But when the New York Times says that Benjamin Netanyahu is leading Donald Trump by, like a dog, leading a blind Donald Trump like his guide dog, that's not something that's anti-Semitic, according to people like this. But whatever, doesn't matter. What else we got in this nonsense? Complete crap. James O'Keefe. This one is pretty interesting. He's repeatedly pushed doctored and misled undercover videos. That's a lie. It's completely inaccurate. You go down to the one that's really interesting is Tim Pool. A study found. So let me just throw out there, if a study needs to find my political views when I have outright told them to you, you are definitely lying. A study found that Pool was near the center of networks of far-right YouTube accounts. Completely ridiculous. By the way, let's go ahead and look at this. I have to find where exactly it is. So he's about right here. Let's look at the other people who are around him. Coach Red Pill. Is that far right? Some black guy. Is that far right? Certainly not racist. It's some black guy, right? Blonde in the belly of the beast. Baked Alaska. Baked Alaska has not recently as in the last month or so, but as recently as in since 2017, has been one of the biggest critics of the quote far right on YouTube, calling for YouTube censorship out there, right? But he's apparently far right. At the center of a bunch of far right, I mean, it's nonsense. It's complete and utter nonsense. Pool has done videos with, and otherwise interacted with multiple white nationalist and far right figures. 3 problems. Thing number 1, a bunch of the people they're going to name in here are not actually far right or white nationalist. Thing number 2, if he had interacted with these people, either on a friendly level or having interviewed them, that would not mean he endorsed their views in any way, shape, or form. Thing number 3, if he did endorse some of their views, it would not mean that he endorsed other views that they had that may or may not be white nationalist, right? And there used to be a point in time when you could interview somebody without being considered an agreeer with them, right? It could be a debate. You could interview them even in either just, I want to know what you're saying in an informative fashion, right? Much in the same way that Morty Downey Jr. interviewed Mayor Kahana or Ron Paul or things like that, right? Or you could interview them in an adversarial way, like both of those interviews eventually became, right? And you didn't have to be associated with their views. You can even support their right to speak, and you still wouldn't have to be associated with their views, right? But nonetheless, Pool has done multiple YouTube videos with white nationalist figures, such as Brittany Pettibone, who has worked with other far-right figures to prevent refugees from reaching Europe and was banned in the UK with her fiancé, Martin Sneller, a leader of the white nationalist Australian identitarian movement. Pool has also appeared with Lauren Southern, who amplified the white supremacist conspiracy theory of a white genocide occurring in South Africa, which is a fact. That is fact that is happening. Okay. Now, to say that it's a genocide is a little bit of a stretch, definitely. But to say that there are targeted attacks against the white population of South Africa, specifically farmers, is not a stretch in any way, shape, or form. And for the media and Media Matters to belittle that is just proof positive that they are evil. Verifiably evil. Objectively evil. Factually evil. We continue. Pool has also socialized with James Alsop and Tim Giannett, also known as Baked Alaska, who often tweeted neo-Nazi imagery and Hitler apologism. Pool has also been a guest on InfoWars, and in 2017 he offered to help InfoWars' Paul Joseph Watson investigate an area of Sweden that Watson called crime-ridden migrant suburbs. So helping somebody investigate crime-ridden areas is apparently racist. Paul Joseph Watson is apparently far-right, etc. Pushed a smear from a far-right troll linking journalists to anti-fascists. Soon after far-right troll, Eoin Lenahan pushed a smear that certain reporters were closely associated with anti-fascist activists. Pool amplified the smear in a YouTube video titled "Verified Journalists Exposed Working with Antifa and Far-Left Activists." Watch that video. It is a fact. This is just them trying to cover up what is definitely a fact. And so there's so much factual error in this, it's completely ridiculous. The point that I am trying to point out here is you should not trust Certainly Not News. You should not trust Media Matters. You should not trust your mainstream media sources. You shouldn't even trust me, by the way. Check everything. Source it. Look at it for yourself, because everybody has agendas. A lot of people are lying to you, and some people are actually not caring at all. They have no conscience about it. Okay? Conscience about it, whatever. From InfoWars, The Alex Jones Show. 1 in 1,000 InfoWars wins Sandy Hook appeal request. This is super awesome. One of the greatest things that has happened recently. Lawyer Norm Pattis joins The Alex Jones Show to break down the historic and rare decision in the case against Alex Jones to be heard before the Connecticut State Supreme Court. We'll listen to a little bit of this.
Basically saying, hey, you didn't...
Well, actually, no, we're not, because I only got 10 minutes left. So we're going to post this in the description, and you guys can listen to this. You definitely should. It's actually 22 minutes long. But we got other things that we need to get to real quick. Specifically, this crap. Meet the rich and powerful people in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit, from Donald Trump to Bill Clinton. Jeffrey Epstein, for those of you who are unaware, is a multi-billionaire pedophile who had his own private island where he would kidnap little girls between the ages of 13 and 16 and then proceed to rape them profusely with all of his rich buddies. Because he's a disgusting, vile waste of flesh who, once he is found guilty of this, which he will, because it is a fact that he did this, right? Once he is found guilty in a court of law by a trial of a jury of his peers, right? He should have his head rolled, quite frankly. He should be executed. But anyways, since Saturday's arrest of billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein, and by the way, actually, before I start this, I do just need to say, when Alex Jones was saying that pedophiles run the planet, when Paul Joseph Watson was saying that they have these spirit cooking festivals and things like that, when Mark Dice was saying, for lack of better term, because this isn't their actual name, but an Illuminati in the sense of that there are people who have weird cultic beliefs who are running government in a deep state fashion, when they were saying this, right, it was true. And it is still true. And Jeffrey Epstein proves that it's true. Let's continue. Since Saturday's arrest of billionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein on charges of sex trafficking for allegedly bringing dozens of minors, some as young as 14, to his home in New York City and Palm Beach, Florida, and molesting them, there has been much to discuss in regards to the lurid case. Stories abound on everything from the legal Stories abound on everything from the legal details to Epstein's privileged existence, including his various homes, a $56 million, seven-story townhouse in Manhattan, and a private Caribbean island called Little James Island, among others. The photos of nude girls kept in his New York home, since seized by law enforcement, and the controversial no prosecution way Epstein was dealt with the last time he faced similar charges in 2006 and was given a shockingly lenient plea deal from then prosecutor and current Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, whom President Donald Trump has defended amid calls for his resignation. He has since resigned, I believe. The fact that he was ever made the Labor Secretary should make you incredibly skeptical of President Donald Trump and his cabinet. Because it's not just him, it's also been Rex Tillerson, right? It's also been H.R. McMasters. It's also been John Bolton, okay? Donald Trump has a history of being associated with very bad people. And I think it's because Donald Trump is a very bad people, personally. It's just my own opinion. But of course, if you're a conservative, you have to support Trump, right? It's nonsense. Yet another tangent is the tangled web of Epstein's many celebrity and political connections over the years. Not a surprise considering his status as a billionaire, but intriguing nonetheless. After all, he told New York Magazine in a 2002 profile, quote, "I invest in people, be it politics or science, it's what I do," end quote. Let's take a walk through Epstein's decades of investing in and rubbing elbows with power players, many of whom supported him at one point, but are now distancing themselves, breaking down the connections along the way, starting with perhaps the most high-profile of all, Donald Trump. Quote, "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy," end quote, Trump famously said about Epstein in a 2002 New York profile. Quote, "He's been a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side, no doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life, end quote. Did he mean 14 or 15, or did he mean 24, 25? Well, it gets weird when you consider the fact that Donald Trump himself likes him around 24 and 25. So what does he mean by on the younger side than what he already likes himself? I don't know. Trump is photographed at least twice with Epstein at Mar-a-Lago, where they co-hosted parties, once in 1997 above and another time in 2000 below, along with Milena and media mogul, Ghislaine Maxwell. More on her later. He allegedly socialized with Epstein in 2002, which is the alleged start of the encounters for which he was just charged. On Tuesday, Trump told reporters about Epstein, quote, "I had a falling out with him. I haven't spoke to him in 15 years. I was not a fan of his, that I can tell you." Which isn't what he said at the time, but obviously it's what he's going to say now, because Trump is the quintessential populist, liar, and flip-flopper who has absolutely no integrity whatsoever. Somebody with integrity, if he wasn't associated with the crimes at all, by the way, which is something that I'm not entirely convinced with any of these people that they're not. It's known fact that Donald Trump is a friend of the Clintons. I don't know why anybody misses that, but nonetheless, would be to say, hey, I'm sorry I ever supported the guy. It's sick and disgusting. Maybe if he was a good friend of yours, you can say it breaks my heart that he decided to do sick and disgusting things. But disown it, right? You don't say, oh, I was never a fan. That I can tell you. That's a lie. Former POTUS Bill Clinton reportedly flew at at least 26. That is a weird way to put that. Flew at least 26 times on Epstein's private jet, dubbed the Lolita Express by tabloids in the early 2000s. According to Fox News' interpretation of flight records, which also allegedly revealed a 2002 flight to Africa with Epstein, Clinton, and actors Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker aboard. Kevin Spacey, of course, being somebody who was a known sexual predator, as is Donald Trump, as is Bill Clinton. Notice how they congregate together. They were, quote, a mission to... They were on a mission to explore the problems of AIDS and economic developments in Africa, according to Vanity Fair piece at the time, which also noted, quote, there are many women in his life, mostly young, but there is no one of them to whom he has been able to commit. On Tuesday, however, Clinton's office released a statement saying that he knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those which he has been recently charged with in New York. Further, it noted Clinton had taken a total of 4 trips on Epstein's jet, that he had not spoken to him in well over a decade. Now, those are the ones that interest me, but there are some other pretty interesting names on here. Check this out. We got Prince Andrew. Gawker leaked the contents of Epstein's Little Black Book in 2015, revealing an array of celebs, including the likes of Courtney Love, Ehud Barak, Alec Baldwin, Ralph Phineas, and Ted Kennedy. It also showed Prince Andrew on there, younger brother of Prince Charles. Who else do we have down here? Woody Allen. Ghislaine Maxwell, the British socialite daughter of media mogul Robert Maxwell, reportedly dated Epstein briefly and then remained a close confidant. Friends they had in common include Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, and Attorney General Alan Dershowitz, who is another one who is now involved here. She has been accused with Epstein of acting as the heads of an organized crime family with Maxwell, helping to recruit and groom the young girls. And of course, you have Alan Dershowitz. You have William Barr, right? Who is the current Attorney General. You have Deepak Chopra, a New Age guru. A lot of interesting names here, right? Kenneth Starr. A lot of interesting names here. Why are so many of these people? Now, does that mean that all of them are guilty? No, certainly not. We shouldn't jump to conclusions too far. Part of the reason I do with Trump and Clinton is because I know that they're both sexual perverts. I know that they're deviants, right? For those of you who may be surprised, which shouldn't be anybody who watches the show consistently, but I am a conservative. I hate people who hate Trump because they are completely ridiculous. I am not a fan of the president, though, okay? And I've been perfectly clear about that. But very interesting, wouldn't you say? A few things we want to get on briefly before we move on here. So, Cardinal Zen warns Pope Francis that the Vatican directives for China Church may lead to death of true faith. This is from Bree Dale at LifeSite News. Hong Kong, July 5th, 2019. The Bishop Emeritus of Hong Kong has spoken out forcefully against the Vatican's newest pastoral document for the Chinese Church, which gives reasons for why priests should register with the communist government. Yes, you heard that correctly. Should register with the communist government. Why? Because Pope Francis has sold out the church in China, saying that making the only legitimate Christian church in China the Catholic Church, so long as they use a communist-approved and edited Bible and have communist-approved and edited bishops. Real whack. Cardinal Joseph Zen presented 9 criticisms to Pope Francis and Cardinal Pietro Parolin on a recent trip to Rome July 1st that outlined his concerns about the document. Quote, a text is signed against the faith and is stated that the intention is to promote the good of the community, a more suitable evangelization, and the responsible management of church assets. This general rule is obviously against all fundamental moral theology. If valid, it would justify even apostasy, end quote, which is true, said the Cardinal in his criticisms, which were published on the website today. Quote, this document has radically turned people upside what is normal and what is abnormal, what is rightful and what is pitiable. Those who wrote it hoped perhaps that the pitied minority will die a natural death. By this minority, I mean not only underground priests, but also the many brothers of the official community who have worked with great tenacity to achieve change, hoping for the support of the Holy See, end quote, he stated later in his criticisms of the pastoral document. Cardinal Zen has been deeply involved in the recent protests that opposed the Chinese state imposition of extradition laws in Hong Kong. Many believe these laws would continue Many believe these laws would continue the methodical takeover of the former British colony, now acting as an independent special administrative region. His absence, however, was noted in the recent protests. In a statement issued this morning, His Eminence explained what caused him to remain silent until this week. Quote, on the evening of June 28th, I received notice that the Holy See had issued the newest pastoral document for the church in China. As a bishop and a cardinal, I cannot accept this quietly. I must raise my doubts. It was for this purpose that I boarded a plane to Rome on the evening of the 29th, end quote. He continues, quote, at noon on Sunday, which is June 30th, I handed a letter to the Pope to the security guard at Santa Marta Dormitory, the papal residence, asking the Pope to let me, and the author of the statement, discuss the document in front of him. As I had not received a response by 4 p.m. on Monday, which is July 1st, I wrote another letter to the private secretary of the Pope, where I also attached my dubia. The secretary confirmed that my initial letter to the Pope had been received, end quote. Cardinal Zen finally received a response with the Office of the Secretary of State the evening of Tuesday, July 2nd. His Eminence was told by an official that, quote, the Pope said my question could be discussed with the Secretary of State. I said, then it is lost. I have absolutely no confidence that meeting him, Cardinal Parolin, will have any impact, end quote. And he's exactly right, and I hope Cardinal Zen is having a wake-up call to realize the Catholic Church is evil. It is not Christ's church. And I know I'm getting a little bit into religious grounds here, but leave that church, my friend. Come to the Holy Spirit. Come to God. Leave that church. Go fight with your Protestant and other Catholic, other disassociated Catholic brothers and sisters who are being persecuted by the Catholic Church. And American Christians, myself included, we got to support these guys in any way that we can, and we got to prepare ourselves because this is something that may very well happen in this country soon. I think Cardinal Zen's going to have to give his life, honestly. I really do. I've said this for a long time. Either the Catholic Church is going to make him do it or the Chinese government is going to make him do it, but there's no way that this guy stays alive, in my opinion. I hope he does. But I don't know, man. You're talking about a group that has actual concentration camps that they put Falun Gong and Muslims and Christians in, right? Talking about a group that has massacred people, has slaughtered them in the counts of tens of millions, right? So, it's a very dangerous game. Wednesday evening, however, Cardinal Zen received an invitation by Pope Francis to have dinner with him and with Cardinal Parolin, Vatican Secretary of State. He writes, quote, it is impolite to argue at dinner. We spoke only about the situation in Hong Kong. As for the pastoral document in my statement, I only mentioned it to the Pope in the last few minutes. Pope said several times, "I will pay attention to this matter. This is the only sentence I have brought back to my people." I also handed my dubia to the Secretary of State, who did not say anything at the dinner, end quote. In his criticisms listed below, Cardinal Zen provides commentary on why, section by section, the newest Sino-Vatican pastoral document falls well short of any real pastoral care of the members of the Holy Mother Church in China. Quote, "When brothers from China ask me what to do, I have always given the answer to respect the choices of others and to remain firm in the conviction of one's conscience. This is because I have no authority to impose my views on others about what is right or wrong. But doesn't the Holy See have the authority and therefore the duty to clarify precisely this to the members of the Church? Are the pastoral guidelines doing that?" End quote. And unfortunately, you do see there, you see two things. First off, I think he's kind of realizing the moral deficiency of the Church to a certain extent. But he's also looking at the Church saying, isn't this supposed to be your domain? And, giving them that kind of power is what gets you in this problem in the first place. Zen ends his criticism with the following exhortation, quote, "May the Lord not allow the fulfillment of the wishes of those who want the death of the true faith in my dear homeland," end quote. And amen to that. And I hope that Cardinal Zen finds the true faith, which is out of the Catholic Church. But we will talk more about that in a future episode of Unapologetics. Then it has the dubia by Cardinal Zen on the pastoral guidelines by the Holy See concerning the civil registration of the clergy in China. I recommend you read that. This is going to be in the comment section below, but we do not have time to read that because there's one other thing I want to get to, and that is that liberals cheer as Antifa violence escalates. Okay? On the early hours of Saturday, police in Tacoma, Washington rushed to the local immigration and customs enforcement facility. An armed man was firebombing the building and nearby vehicles. Police killed him in a shootout after he attempted to set off a large propane tank connected to the facility. Antifa social media accounts subsequently identified their fallen comrade as Willem Van Spronsen. The underreported incident marks a new chapter in the return of armed left-wing terrorism to the United States. It also triggered a flash memory in my mind. I had crossed paths with Van Spronsen in December when a group of rifle-carrying Antifa militiamen tried to prevent me from filming their protest outside Seattle City Hall. Little did I know that I would soon have a more immediate encounter with Antifa violence. 2 weeks ago, I was left hospitalized with a brain hemorrhage after a mob of masked-clad rioters beat and robbed me. This is Andy Go, by the way. Responding, or Andy No, sorry. Responding, or is it Go? No, Yo, I don't know how you say that. Anyways, while I was covering a demonstration in downtown Portland, Oregon, the attack claimed by Rose City Antifa was caught on videos that went viral. As shocking as my unprovoked beating was, I'm hardly the first to be cruelly beaten by Antifa. I've been reporting Antifa since the early days of the 2016 election, when Portlanders woke up to find that downtown had been ravaged by black-clad vandals and arsonists overnight. Since then, the militants have repeatedly brutalized the city's population. They have learned from experience the city government and police lack the political will to protect citizens. Though known for the hallmark masks and black uniforms, Antifa isn't a formal centralized group. Its members operate as a loose grouping of militant Marxists and anarchists drawn to the various autonomous far-left groups. Political violence is a feature, not a bug, of Antifa, which believes itself to be in an existential struggle with latter-day fascism. The worst part is how prominent media figures and politicians glamorize and even promote Antifa as a movement for a just cause. Certainly not news as Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon have defended Antifa on air. Chuck Todd invited Antifa ideologue Mark Bray on Meet the Press to explain why Antifa's political violence is ethical. Keith Ellison gleefully posted and recently deleted a selfie of himself holding Bray's Antifa handbook. Representative Maxine Waters met hard-left political operative Joseph Alkoff in 2016. Alkoff is currently facing felony charges for his alleged involvement in an Antifa mob beating of 2 Marines in Philadelphia. He does not mention also that Mitt Romney has defended them, saying that they are not morally equivalent to fascists because they are fighting fascists. Moving on. The last choice of targets, Marines, was no accident. Antifa operates by a very broad definition of fascist. By Antifa's telling, fascists include mainstream conservatives and even centrist journalists who dare criticize them. But they save most of their hatred for U.S. law enforcement and military service members. Antifa's goal is violent political revolution, and it sees law enforcement officers and the military as the main obstacles. In the Pacific Northwest, where Antifa is especially active, the group has continually targeted ICE. Last summer, the local ICE building in Portland faced a 5-week siege and shut down the facility. Why? Antifa seeks to destabilize and destroy the nation state by attacking its sovereign borders. and the group draws morale from mainstream progressive politicians, such as Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who normalize hatred of border enforcement and sovereignty as such. Ocasio-Cortez, as well as Rashida Tlaib, as well as Ilhan Omar, have refused to condemn the terrorist attacks by Antifa, and in fact have even had language that seems to be endorsing it. Vance Bronson, last weekend's Antifa firebomber, expressed disdain for the state in a manifesto attributed to him on Seattle's Anti-Fascist Action Facebook page. It has since been deleted. He allegedly wrote, quote, "I am Antifa," and referred to ICE concentration, or centers, as concentration camps. I was going to say concentration camps as centers, but it's the other way around, so my apologies. Language taken directly from AOC. Last summer, he took part in a siege of the same Tacoma ICE facility. He attacked Saturday, assaulted an officer, and was found to be carrying a baton and a knife. He pleaded guilty to obstructing police and was released under a deferred sentence. As the Saturday incident shows, law enforcement should pay more attention to the various armed militias that ally with the wider Antifa movement. Vance Bronson was a member of the John Brown Gun Club, a Marxist gun organization that calls itself anti-fascist, anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and anti-patriarchy. The JBGC was glowingly featured in May's episode of Certainly Not News' United Shades of America. Host W. Kamau Bell even solicited donations from the public on the group's behalf. Elite cheering of terrorism, hasn't been this chick since Leonard Bernstein fundraised for the Black Panthers at the Park Avenue Parade. Now, we're going to have civil violence in the Pacific Northwest. Just get used to the idea, because it's going to happen. Okay? I don't like that idea. I am very displeased with that idea, in fact. It frightens me. But it's going to happen. It's just a matter of fact at this point. Will it get to the point of a full-fledged civil war? Maybe. We'll see. There happens to be a lot of disagreement in this area with the savages that you have over in Seattle and Vancouver and Portland and California and Salt Lake City and even in Boise, right? And a lot of very conservative people. The divide, my point is, in Idaho and Washington and Oregon, in Northern California, in Nevada, in Colorado, in Utah, Montana, right, is huge. Which has always been the reason why I think it has a high potential for violence. I've said this in the past. Will that turn into a full-fledged conflict? I don't know. I kind of think so. I think we're looking at a Syrian civil war situation in the future. How far in the future? Couldn't tell you. I don't think I am that wise. A decade, maybe? Potentially less, potentially more, depending on what happens, right? We started seeing small instances of violence before the United States Civil War. The first one, at least, right? Because this would obviously be a second one if it happens. Remember, John Brown, which they actually named themselves after, right? Went after the armory in Harper's Ferry in 1859. That was just 2 years before the Civil War happened. There is, of course, other instances before that, like the Amistad Incident and the Nat Turner Rebellion, that are a good 20, 30 years before the American Civil War. Is this any of those, or is this potentially the Weather Underground bombing areas, or the Kent State Massacre, right? Things that ended up going nowhere. I don't think it's the latter. I definitely think it's the former. Which one of the two former, I couldn't say. But we are definitely at that point. With elites and people in in the media and people in Hollywood and people in politics egging on this violence, with Facebook saying, yeah, we're totally down with you endorsing this violence, with Google and other social media platforms going out of their way to go after certain political ideologies and religious ideologies and philosophical ideologies and etc. that they disagree with. We are going to get to that point very quickly. We are at the point of that being inevitable, in my opinion, without the divine intervention of God, right? Which, personally, I don't think will happen, because I don't think the country will turn to God. I, of course, could be wrong about that. I hope I'm wrong about that. I pray that I'm wrong about that. But we'll see what happens, right? But this is the future that I personally am seeing. I think there's going to be violent altercation here. And by the way, in a lot of ways, it's unavoidable. Because you could say, well, let's go after militias. Well, you can't. The Second Amendment says that there should be militias, and for good reason. Because if and when the government gets tyrannical, if and when Antifa decides that they're going to start attacking, there needs to be militias that can protect the people, that can protect the Constitution, that can protect Christianity in this area. And the Jews in this area, who will, of course, be attacked by groups when this happens, because left-wing and right-wing groups that are extreme always tend to hate the Jews, and etc., right? But anyways, that's all we got. Very depressing, I know, but hey, this is the Watchdog. Welcome to it. I'm your host, C.Jay Cox. Shalom. If you like this, please do give a like and share and subscribe to us here on the TheCynicogue YouTube channel if you find our content to be interesting. We have the Watchdog here, which is our political and news talk show. We also have, and this is on weekdays that this is posted, we also have on weekends the Unapologetics, Christian Apologetics program, if you're interested in that. Obviously more religious, less secular, less news-oriented, all that kind of stuff. Both of these here on the TheCynicogue. You can also go to Cynic Thought on Instagram, ACP Official on Gab, Terrestrial Earthbird on Twitter, or the American Cynic Party page on Facebook to like us on any of those places. The best place to go there, and also the TheCynicogue on Minds. The best place to go there would be Gab, in my opinion. Go on Gab, get a new Gab. If you don't have a Gab, just get one, and you can find all of our content there, as well as a bunch of memes, stuff like that. Get on Gab, like us on Gab, but all the other ones like us on too, right? Subscribe here. We're going to have all the articles in the comment section below, so there's going to be that for you, and as well as links to all those social media accounts. So thank you for that. Shalom. You guys have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you next week.